Good day to you, scholars. This is Brad Zoll with Zulon International Bible Institute, and today we want to talk about a book that is very impactful, and it handles really man's frustration and a lot of questions as to why God would allow pain in this life if he's such a good God. They called it theodicy through the centuries. It's an argument over God being righteous and just in the midst of having so much wrong. And that's the way that you would spell it, theodicy. And it's been a highly, highly emotional argument through the centuries. We're going to talk about it here as we go into the book called The Problem of Pain with C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis. Now take a look at what it says down here, how human suffering raises almost intolerable intellectual problems. C.S. Lewis, as you know, was a professor of medieval and Renaissance literature at Cambridge University, as we see back here, and his books that you will see have also been classics through the years. Mere Christianity, which is another one of the lesson channels that we have here at Zulon, is also one of the ones that we talk about bit by bit. C.S. Lewis was an atheist who came to Christ through seeing that really not only did it make sense, but it gave hope. And he had written numerous books on the Christian life and who Jesus is and how society will deal with the fact of God and faith. And so you'll see a number of those different books, and we'll add them to the Zulon Bible Institute. So the reason we have this as part of our training is for you to be able to talk with people who would really push away from any teaching from the Bible or have any idea that they want to see anything having to do with faith. Well, this is a very, very powerful book. C.S. Lewis himself, as you read in the introduction, says, I've suffered very greatly, and I've had some times of really wondering why in the world I hurt so bad. C.S. Lewis was a late life bachelor who then found a wonderful American wife, and she died within a couple of years, very tragically, of cancer. It was drawn out, and so he suffered very deeply. One of the books that I read after my sibling died was A Grief Observed, and I just absolutely tore through it. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at this first one when people will say to you, why in the world would God, who's supposed to be so nice, make us go through so much suffering? So I want to bring this to you in a very, very powerful message. It's not a very thick book, but we're going to go through chapter by chapter, section by section. And I'm going to start off by reading some of it, and then we'll discuss. And then you can take some notes, and then for the testing later on, you can write these things back. But think of someone who is going through suffering right now, how you would talk to them in this basis. Now, some of this gets pretty deep, and so if you need to stop the video and rewind, move it back, and look at it again, please do so. And you understand on how he's presenting this, okay? So again, I will read this, and we will discuss, and I'll go through the introduction, and we will take our time so that we can reasonably understand this. This is the very first section, which is the introductory section before we get to chapter 1. Not many years ago when I was an atheist, C.S. Lewis writes, if anybody had asked me, why do you not believe in God? My reply would have run something like this, quote, look at the universe we live in. By far, the greatest part of it consists of empty space, complete dark and unimaginably cold. The bodies which move in this space are so few and so small in comparison with the space itself that even if every one of them were known to be crowded as full as it could hold with perfectly happy creatures, it would still be difficult to believe that life and happiness were more than a byproduct to the power that made the universe. As it is, however, the scientists think it likely that very few of the suns of space, perhaps none of them except our own, have any planets. And in our own system, it is improbable that any planet except the Earth sustains life. And Earth herself existed without life for millions of years and may exist for millions more when life has left her. And what is it like while it lasts? It's so arranged that all the forms of it can live only by preying upon one another. Prey. Now remember, he's speaking as an atheist right now. In the lower forms, this process entails only death, but in the higher, there appears a new quality called consciousness, which enables it to be attended with pain. The creatures cause pain by being born and live by inflicting pain, and in pain they mostly die. In the most complex of all the creatures, man, yet another quality appears, which we call reason, whereby he is unable to foresee his own pain, which henceforth is preceded with acute mental suffering, and to foresee his own death while keenly desiring permanence. It also enables men by 100 ingenious contrivances to inflict a great deal more pain than they otherwise could have done on one another and on the irrational creatures. This power they've exploited to the full. Their history is largely a record of crime, war, disease, and terror, with just sufficient happiness interposed to give them, while it lasts, an agonized apprehension of losing it, and, when it is lost, the poignant misery of remembering. I'm still reading, he's still talking if he were still an atheist. Continuing on his reasoning as an atheist. Every now and then they improve their condition a little, and what we call a civilization appears. But all civilizations pass away, and even while they remain, inflict peculiar sufferings of their own, probably sufficient to outweigh what alleviation they may have brought to the normal pains of man. That our own civilization has done so, no one will dispute. That it will pass away like all predecessors is surely probable. Even if it should not, what then? The race is doomed. Every race that comes into being in any part of the universe is doomed. For the universe, they tell us, is running down and will sometimes be a uniform infinity of homogeneous matter at a low temperature. All stories will come to nothing. All life will turn out in the end to have been a transitory and senseless contortion upon the idiotic face of infinite matter. If you ask me to believe that this is the work of a benevolent and omnipotent spirit, I reply that all the evidence points in the opposite direction. Either there is no spirit behind the universe, or else a spirit indifferent to good and evil, or else an evil spirit. End quote. Now remember, this is what he would have said when it was said at the very beginning, when the question comes, why do you not believe in God? His reply would have run something like this: when I was an atheist. Okay, now let's continue. That's what he would have said as an atheist. There was one question which I never dreamed of raising. I never noticed that the very strength and facility of the pessimist case at once poses us a problem. If the universe is so bad, or even half so bad, how on earth did human beings ever come to attribute it to the activity of a wise and good creator? Men are fools, perhaps, but hardly so foolish as that. The direct inference from black to white, from evil flower to virtuous root, from senseless work to a workman infinitely wise, staggers belief. The spectacle of the universe as revealed by experience can never have been the ground of religion. It must have always been something in spite of which religion, acquired from a different source, was held. It would be an error to reply that our ancestors were ignorant and therefore entertained pleasing illusions about nature, which the progress of science has since dispelled. For centuries, during which all men believed, the nightmare size and emptiness of the universe was already known. You will read it in some books that the men of the Middle Ages thought the earth flat and the stars near, but that's a lie. Ptolemy had told them that the earth was a mathematical point without size in relation to the distance of the fixed stars, a distance which one medieval popular text estimates as 117 million miles. And in times earlier yet, even from the beginnings, men must have got the same sense of hostile immensity from a more obvious source. So what he's saying so far is, why would man ever come up with God being good if this were true? There's one problem of the atheist in saying, where would man ever come up with a benevolent creator, or even the idea of a God or someone in charge? Let's continue on. To prehistoric man, the neighboring forest must have been infinite enough. To the utterly alien and infest which we have to fetch from the thought of cosmic rays and cooling suns, came snuffing and howling nightly to his very doors. Certainly at all periods, the pain and waste of human life was equally obvious. Our own religion begins among the Jews, a people squeezed between great warlike empires, continually defeated and led captive, familiar as Poland or Armenia, with the tragic story of the conquered. In other words, it keeps getting beat down and beat down. It's mere nonsense to put pain among the discoveries of science. Lay down this book and reflect for 5 minutes on the fact that all the great religions were first preached and long practiced in a world without chloroform. What is he saying? He's saying, consider this. All the great faiths of the world really started in the midst of pain. At all times then, an inference from the course of events in this world to the goodness and wisdom of the Creator, with a capital C, would have been equally preposterous, and it was never made. Religion has a different origin. In what follows, it must be understood that I am not primarily arguing the truth of Christianity, but describing its origin, a task, in my view, necessary if we're to put the problem of pain in its right setting. So what I'm going to do is then have you think and write down, was there ever a time in history that a belief was started outside of pain? That the concept of God was started because everything was going right? Think about the times of prosperity, even here in America. Do people rush toward God because of his goodness? No. I'm going to continue reading. In all developed religion, we find 3 strands or elements, and in Christianity, 1 more. The first of these is what Professor Otto calls the experience of the numinous. Now, let me spell that down for you. Numinous. This is a very important word that's going to come up here, and so I'm going to put quotes around it. This is numinous. Okay, the experience of the numinous. Those who have not met this term may be introduced to it by the following device. Suppose you were told there was a tiger in the next room. You'd probably know that you were in danger and would probably feel fear. But if you were told there is a ghost in the next room and believed it, you'd feel indeed what is often called fear, but of a different kind. It would not be based on the knowledge of danger, for no one's primarily afraid of what a ghost may do to them, but of the mere fact that it is a ghost. It is uncanny rather than dangerous, and the special kind of fear that excites may be called dread. With the uncanny, one has reached the fringes of the numinous. Now, suppose that you were told simply, there's a mighty spirit in the room, and you believed it. Your feelings would then be even less like the mere fear of danger, but the disturbance would be profound. You would feel wonder and certain shrinking, a sense of inadequacy to cope with such a visitant and of prostration before it, an emotion which might be expressed in Shakespeare's words, under it, my genius is rebuked. In other words, in that room, there is an almighty, and you're suddenly saying, I'm not worthy. I don't know what I could do, and I'm not that smart after all, if it's almighty. That's what he's saying. This feeling may be described as awe, and the object which excites it as the numinous. So the key word here is numinous as we start going. Now, I know you say, I don't even know that we even took the first step toward the problem of pain. No, but we have to get some key words down here because we're going to go in some very deep waters in talking. And so I want you to put these notes down, and we'll continue on in the introduction as we go into, once again, in this class time, C.S. Lewis, The Problem of Pain. Thank you so much, and let's get to our second lesson here.